Ancient Sparta is a polity considered unique from all other ancient Greek cities, not just by modern audiences, but by its contemporaries and even its own population. There are many examples of Sparta's deviation from the rest of the Greek world, from their supposed austerity in life, to their state-owned system of land control, to their extreme militarized society. However, this idealization of Sparta conceals a far more complex reality, a phenomenon described by the French classicist François Ollier as the Spartan Mirage. Behind centuries of Spartan propagandists who promoted the idea of Spartan uniqueness lies a reality that reveals Sparta as a city that was still very much a Greek city-state like all the others. In this episode, we will dispel several myths about Spartan uniqueness, including their supposed lack of artistic expression and luxury. Along the way, we will explore both the ways in which Sparta was unique and the many ways in which the Lacedaemonians were much like their Hellenic siblings. So, was Sparta a unique state? Did it possess wealth, poetry, and other cultural practices similar to those found in the rest of the Hellenic world? And what exactly is the Spartan Mirage? Welcome to our myth-busting video on Sparta, where we will discuss just how special it was within the broader context of classical Greek civilization.
Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job.
Before we meet the Spartans and begin scrutinizing their culture, we first need to understand the idea of the Spartan Mirage. The Mirage is, in essence, the vision of Sparta that exists in today's modern culture, featuring a city of muscle-bound warriors living austere communal lifestyles focused solely on cultivating immense military might. As the Spartans themselves left behind few written records, this image of Sparta was originally created by outsiders from other parts of ancient Greece. These include the Athenian mercenary and historian Xenophon, as well as Thucydides, the Athenian who chronicled the Peloponnesian Wars fought between Athens and Sparta. Herodotus, for his part, described Sparta as an autocratic society with more in common with the Persians than their fellow Greeks. This notion of Sparta as a uniquely militaristic, communal, and austere society has persisted through the ages. After the Romans conquered southern Greece, they transformed Sparta into a tourist destination, capitalizing on its purportedly martial past to attract visitors. 1,000 years later, when European intellectuals began rediscovering the classical world, Enlightenment thinkers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau continue to perpetuate the myth of Sparta as a society of invincible, monk-like warriors. In modern times, however, the Spartan Mirage has been criticized by scholars who have worked on Sparta, such as Paul Cartledge and Stephen Hodkinson. With this in mind, let us see what the truth of Sparta is. The most prominent myth about Sparta is its supposed extreme austerity. In this view, propagated by ancient authors such as the Greek philosopher Plato, the Spartans were a people who denounced extravagance and wealth, preferring simple lives. This monk-like perception of Spartan society possibly traces its roots to the mythical lawgiver of ancient Sparta, a man called Lycurgus, who mandated that his people use heavy iron money as their principal currency, in order to avoid the Spartans being enamored with gold. This example has recently been questioned by archaeologists and historians, both of whom point out that Sparta was simply a latecomer in the use of minted coinage. Coins of Spartan origin appeared in sizable quantities at the end of the 5th century BCE and were made of silver. This development reveals that Sparta was not immune to the use of ordinary coins, and it also used precious metals to make them. Furthermore, it suggests that political divisions existed within a city that was supposedly renowned for its uniformity. In addition to this, the myth that foreign currency was banned in Sparta does not hold up to scrutiny. The Spartan war funds for the Peloponnesian Wars against Athens in the 5th century BCE consisted of gold coins from other cities alongside other precious metals. A lot of this wealth was connected to individual Spartan citizens, suggesting that at least part of the Spartan population had access to this supposedly forbidden foreign currency. Other examples of the Spartans' access to material wealth include the presence of luxurious votive offerings in various shrines in rural regions across Sparta, where offerings of gold and silver have been found in considerable quantities. These luxurious tributes to the gods show that, at least when it came to religion, Sparta had no qualms about wealth. In fact, some scholars, such as Stephen Hodkinson, claim that Sparta was quite unequal in terms of wealth and land tenure. Hodkinson's work has demonstrated that, contrary to some assumptions by ancient and modern authors, Sparta did not have communal property. Instead, Sparta, as a polis, had more power over land confiscation than other cities in Greece did, as well as specific land reserved for state use. Hodkinson argues that land tenure in Sparta was relatively unequal, with wealthier Spartans owning large farming estates managed by enslaved helots, and Spartans of humbler means owning smaller plots of land which they farmed themselves. The fact that Sparta was composed of many small settlements also attests to this reliance on farming, as these smaller settlements often included farming estates. Land inequality was, in fact, one of the reasons behind Spartan manpower issues in the 4th century BCE. Sparta was traditionally a conservative city, preferring to stay within its own sphere of influence rather than expand outward. However, wealth inequality increased due to the concentration of power in large estates through inheritance laws, which favored owners who preferred a more luxurious lifestyle. Other families began to divide their land to the point of poverty, with repercussions for their social status. Various Spartan kings attempted to reverse this trend, but were invariably met with pushback from wealthy Spartan landowners seeking to preserve their wealth. This revelation reveals Sparta to be much like other Greek cities, with inequality baked into its community and economic structures. Another aspect in which Sparta is considered unique is that of its militarism. This aspect of Spartan life is by far its most famous, and is indeed based on some grains of truth. For instance, while all Greek cities had mandatory military service for their citizens to fulfill, in Sparta it was a uniquely long obligation lasting from the age of 20 to 60. Moreover, most Spartan boys took part in a military training program known as the agoge from the ages of 7 to 20. Sparta was also unique in that the state provided the military equipment for the Spartan infantry, whereas other cities required private citizens to fund their own equipment. While the above examples may suggest more state involvement in social affairs related to war, Sparta was not a city organized by its military. In fact, Spartan public and military affairs were intended to be separate, both in terms of visibility and community ties. This is evidenced by the fact that public funerals of Spartan soldiers who died in battle were usually not conducted in Sparta, with the dead being buried near their battlefield where they fell. Other polis, like Athens, emphasized public funerals, but in Sparta very few instances of military funerals occurred. Such avoidance of public mourning suggests that Spartan officials wanted to keep the cost of war as far away from civic society as possible. Thus, war was not meant to be a concern for the average Spartan citizen, but a faraway affair that only arose when discussing strategy in the Apella assembly. Some may counter the above points by saying that Spartan life for men was defined by their attendance of communal meals, known as syssitia, which were organized based on military unit membership. However, These meals were actually both civic and military in nature, with eligibility based on both one's local residence and military status. Hence, the Sycetia only partially organized Spartan life around one's military regimen, and the atmosphere was likely much more like being in a Greek dive bar. These examples demonstrate that Sparta did indeed separate war from civic life, much like other cities. It lacked a public culture of mourning, and had community organizations that were social in nature, even if they sometimes overlapped with military affairs. There is also the case of Spartan politics, which many outsiders considered unique compared to the political systems of other Greek cities. The Spartan political system was distinct among Greek systems in its level of complexity. It had 2 kings, an assembly of elders known as the Gerousia, the 5 elected ephors, as well as a citizens' assembly known as the Apella. Each of these elements can be found individually in other Greek polis, but their co-presence in Sparta is a bit of an outlier. Each Spartan institution was designed to balance the others and promote social harmony. In addition, Sparta was supposed to be driven by social uniformity, with no one citizen becoming too ambitious or lacking moderation. This fact is evidenced by the name of the citizens being homoioi, or similar ones. Consequently, Sparta's principles of mixed government and uniformity have led many authors to view the polis as uniquely politically unified. However, Spartan politics were just as polarizing as in any other Greek polis. For instance, in the histories by Herodotus, the Spartan king Cleomenes was accused of being insane and then later turned up dead. What was supposedly a suicide has been suspected of having been an assassination by the man who became king in his stead, Leonidas of the Battle of Thermopylae fame. This example of murder shows that politicking and polarization were present in Sparta. These myths of social harmony were propagated by both Laconophile authors and the Spartans themselves, as they thought these helped Sparta's reputation. Despite this, Spartan politics were just as chaotic as the factional squabbling of any other Greek city. Sparta is also recognized for its unique social composition and community values. Social practices are another instance in which Sparta had some very distinct ways of doing things. For instance, women in Sparta were educated in both physical and mental matters. Moreover, as mentioned previously, Sparta projected an image of uniformity, a fact which extended to sport. The Lacedaemonians were said not to demonstrate ambition or individuality lest they fall into hubris. Enforcement of laws on matters such as sports supposedly enforced uniformity and austerity, as claimed by some authors, who suggest that the Spartans were not meant to celebrate athletic victories. In reality, archaeologists excavating Spartan shrines have discovered numerous examples of votive offerings, with inscriptions that mention individual athletes and their achievements. These include statuettes and inscriptions that mention people by name and their accomplishments. The conclusion we draw from these private offerings is that Spartans could, and indeed did, celebrate individual achievements and were not as slavishly conformist as we are led to believe. Another facet of Spartan society that was often contrasted to that of other Greek cities was the restrictiveness of its citizenship. Spartan citizenship usually required that both of one's parents be native Spartans. However, the notion that the Spartans were uniquely restrictive in their citizenship has been questioned by scholars such as Paul Cartledge. Citizenship in Sparta was subject to screening by elders, and contingent on the ability to contribute to the collective meals known as the Sycetia. Despite these tests, it was also possible to become a citizen of Sparta if one was recruited into the Spartan military. These people, known as the Neodamodes, were bestowed with natural rights nearly equal to those of a native-born Spartan. Thus, the Spartans could be more flexible in their relations with foreigners than initially assumed by many authors and traditional scholars. The last aspect of Spartan life we will investigate is that of Spartan artwork. When it came to creative expression, Sparta was far from the austere place that many of the myths about it would suggest. The artistic skill of the votive offerings mentioned previously is also seen in the elaborate design of the architecture and pottery found in the city's settlements. Throughout Spartan history, Spartans patronized flashy art that was often used to display their status and prestige. In addition to material culture, there was also the written word. Although the Spartans left behind precious few written records, their citizens were literate and could appreciate poetry. Examples of local poets include the 7th century poet Tyrtaeus and his contemporary Alkman. Tyrtaeus' poetry concerned itself with military glory, a fact evident in his Elegy and Iambus. Abide then, O young men, shoulder to shoulder, and fight. Begin not foul flight, nor yet be afraid, but make the heart in your breasts both great and stout, and never shrink when you fight the foe. And the elder sort, whose knees are no longer nimble, fly not yet to leave them fallen to earth. Overall, the Spartans were often more intense in their use of traditional Greek institutions than their counterparts in Athens, Thebes, Corinth, and other parts of the Hellenic world. Nonetheless, these institutions were very much present in other cities. There were some instances in which Sparta was unique, like their women having more extensive property rights and their length of military service. However, these are outnumbered by other institutions that were very much Greek. Like any idealized society that is seen as part of a bygone golden age, the reality of Sparta was far more complex than the myths it inspired. The Spartans were stubborn, elitist, and conservative, traits which led to their downfall. But despite their and others' dreamlike projections, they were still very much Greek. This is the greatest lesson of Spartan history, that people make their own history, but not as they please. More videos on the classical Greek world are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video. To watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.